Welcome to the Moonletter Conversation.
Hello everyone, my name is Ben Belinsky and I'd like to welcome our guest, Charm Elakil. Charm is a qualified medical herbalist, natural nutrition practitioner, workshop facilitator, forager, and naturopathic medicine maker. In her 20 years of practice, Charm has been working with a range of health issues. I myself met her when I was a client of hers to help me adjust my nutrition. I'm not going to say how long ago it was, but it was a while. Charm's area of speciality lies with women's health, hormonal and menopause transition, which is what we're going to be talking about. Okay, before we dive into that, Charm, can you tell us
Mm,
something about what started you in this
yeah.
on this path?
Okay. Yes, certainly. Yes. So it all started. I mean, I've always had an interest in natural remedies and always kind of tried different things. But the big sort of starting point for me was when I became ill myself. Um, so I was experiencing a lot of period issues, and in the end, I had to go to the GP, and then I was diagnosed with having fibroids. Um, and so that kind of then took me through this whole process of initially being told that I needed to have a full-blown hysterectomy, which is where your ovaries are removed and so on. And if that had happened, that would have meant that I would have gone into menopause very early on, and I wouldn't be able to, try to have, be able to conceive. And at the age that I was at, I still wanted to. So different things were explored. And at the same time, I then started to look at what I could do myself, not just from what was, being told. Anyway, I didn't go down that route, fortunately. Um, but then I started to try nutrition. And what I felt in a very short space of time was a great sense of wellness that I hadn't experienced before. And it just kind of triggered this, oh, what is that? And wanting to learn more. And the curiosity opened up. And then I came across the course that I ended up doing with a wonderful woman named Barbara Wren. Um, and she just was really able to tie the knots in terms of the whole holistic aspect as well. So that's how I became interested and how I started.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So you mentioned something to me about your approach that you use
Mm,
the seasons and the moon cycle. Well, as an astrologer, I'm
yeah,
particularly interested in this. So could you tell us a little
yeah.
bit more about that?
Yes, well, again, this was because of the training that I had. So obviously, the foundation of nutrition is all to do with what you eat, the amount, whether you're eating enough, whether you're getting the right quantity of nutrients and things like that. But what was great when I did the particular work with Barbara Wren was understanding that it isn't just about what we eat, and we can, you know, the more we are aware of what's going on in our surroundings, the more able our body is able to respond. So, I mean, a simple example is that we have in the UK 4 seasons: autumn, winter, spring, and summer. Now, in the winter, it's very cold, and from a kind of in terms of what's going on for us, ideally, we should be slowing down. We should be using this as an opportunity to hibernate, to replenish ourselves, to rebuild, and to use foods that will enable us to feel nourished. Because you need that for the next phase, which is the spring, which is where things are much more active. And that's exactly what's going on when you look at what's going on with the season in winter. Things are very dormant, very still. But underneath, there's a lot of activities that we don't see. So if we're then, eating as though it's summertime in the winter, that will put a lot of pressure on our system because it's just not able to facilitate that process. It's not a time for cleansing, which is what summertime is all about. So, that's just one very simple example. And then in terms of the moon cycle, so obviously, Ben, you know a lot more when it comes to the moon cycle. But when it comes to looking at it from a health perspective, it can, for example, be simple things like I might say to somebody, if you're wanting to start something afresh, do it at the new moon, because that's the time when, the influences are much more clearer. If you're wanting to do things, for example, like cleansing or decluttering or anything that's to do with starting anew, the new moon phase seems to be the time that works best for most people. And then the full moon is all about manifestation, isn't it? It's if you look at how that relates to what's going on with the flow of the ebb and flow of the tides, that does have a strong influence with the moon. And we are 70% water. So we, even though it's not obvious and it's very subtle, when you become more aware of the moon cycle, just those simple things of the new moon and the full moon alone can really make you more attuned to what's going on and how you're responding. So I like to introduce those two simple concepts to people. And then if people want to kind of go deeper, then I refer them to you, Ben, and get them to look at your Moonletter, because then they can understand it more in the context, in the bigger picture. So is that clear at all?
That really helps. That really helps me understand. Yes, because I wasn't sure, what you meant by that. So
Yeah.
moving on to so you mentioned that the crisis you had, the illness you had, that
Mm.
was that what led to your interest in menopause and that transition?
Well, at the time, that wasn't what was going on for me. And when I initially qualified and then, began to see patients, most of which are women, about 80% of my patients are women. And at the time, a lot of the time, there were other issues, but there was always underlying any of what was going on. There would always be something going on hormonally. But it was, I guess it really was what it kind of came about when I started going through the process myself. And it was more of a retrospective thing because I had heard a lot about the menopause, and most of it was all negative. Um, and I wasn't really sure. I didn't know at the time, for example, that there is a transition phase. I just assumed that, you'd wake up one day and you'd have all these symptoms and it meant that you're going through the menopause. And it just isn't as straightforward as that. And so I started to kind of recognize for myself that, okay, this is a process of change. And it doesn't have to be a process that's negative, because that's a lot of what was out there. So then I started to see more and more women who were starting, that process. But then I realized, okay, not only do I need to focus on supporting them in whatever phase they're at, but also even those who hadn't yet reached that stage, to just alert them about how they can best take care of their hormones and themselves in preparation for, that transition. So because the way it works with menopause, it isn't just that you hit menopause, you have what's called a perimenopause, which can start as early as 40. And then you have the stage where there is what they call cessation of period, and that's usually on average at the age of 51. And then you've got what's called postmenopause, which is where your body is adapting to the fact that there isn't the same amount of estrogen that there was when, prior to the transition. So all of that can create a whole range of different issues, not just related to hot flushes, which is a common thing that you hear people talking about, or, night sweats, but it can change your sleep pattern, change moods. You can have all kinds of issues going on with joint. It can accentuate more of some of the things that can go on. But equally, by knowing about it, you can also minimize how the degree to which it can become an issue, and mostly without HRT as well.
Sorry, HRT.
Oh, sorry. So HRT is hormone replacement therapy, which is the common thing that is prescribed to women when they are faced with a lot of the symptoms that's experienced. And what the hormone replacement therapy does is it's basically replacing the hormones, which is the estrogen that is in decline. So the idea is that by doing that, it will help to level things out. It has its pros and its cons, and I won't go into it because I'm not, medically able to mention or say much about it, but it is something that people are offered, and often it can seem as though that's the only thing that can make the transition bearable. But it doesn't always often work that way. So
What I found very interesting as well was the dates you mentioned. From an astrological point of view, 40 is
ah,
the, yeah, 40
that's yes,
is the half Uranus return, and
yes,
51 is the Chiron return. So I think this is something we can look at another time, but I just wanted to mention that there's
yes,
some we need to look more at that, Charm. I think
yeah,
that would be
yeah,
interesting. Can you
yes,
say,
definitely.
okay, could you say a bit more about the type of, so HRT has got its pros and cons, as you said. Yeah. What type of,
Yeah.
I suppose the word treatment or help would you be providing that
Mm,
doesn't use HRT, just to get a general idea?
yeah, sure. Well, I think the thing is that the main thing for people to recognize is that it isn't just a physical change. It affects on all levels. So I always advocate strongly a holistic approach. And what I mean by that is not just something that's going to, relieve the hot flushes or relieve the pain, because usually when there's the transition going on, because estrogen is in decline, and estrogen doesn't just impact our reproductive system, but it impacts everything. So there's a range of symptoms, all of which is different to the individual. Common things that come up for people are insomnia, and more anxiety, joint pains. I mean, the sort of list goes on, but there is usually something also going on emotionally as well, and more in the way of, people feeling more perhaps more triggered because that buffer isn't there in the same way to support them. So as well as a good, advocating a good diet that's rich in what's called phytoestrogens, which are the type of foods that can, help with the body's way of dealing more effectively with the change, um, what with the transition. But in addition, um, applying certain things like different types of herbal teas, for example, that can help with easing anxiety, but also helping with making the hormones feel more balanced in the body overall. Um, take also using the opportunity for change. So it's a good time for really giving yourself more in the way of self-care, giving yourself more time, maybe looking more into things like mindfulness, maybe starting to explore your creativity so that you're really tapping into who you are, because this is a very powerful time, potentially. And, as well as it being a transition, I see it as a transformation as well. So, it's all about looking at what resources you can, what have you got in your toolbox, as it were. So it could be yoga, it could be taking up talking therapy if that's needed, it could be, going on your first holiday or taking up singing. It really does vary, but it's just really about recognizing the need for self-care and self-love more than any other time.
Because I imagine emotionally, it's a massive, massive change.
Yeah,
A woman
yeah,
can no longer have children, so the idea of
yes,
woman as mother,
yes,
that's that's
yes,
that's that's finishing,
yes,
finishing,
yes,
finished. So there
yes,
must be a massive emotional and sense of identity
yes,
that's
that's right.
changing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly, and that's a good point that you've made, Ben, because this often that's something that hasn't really been talked about. So what then happens is that, you've got the old concept of menopause and of being, oh, they're over the hill, or it's them going wobbly again, and all these negative things. So women going through it in the past have felt very ashamed and confused and depressed. you know so this is why a lot of the work that I do, and I work alongside my colleague Jackie, who we both together created a series of online training, which is really just about raising the awareness of the menopause and what you can do to change the narrative, but also the process, so that it becomes something that's less about feeling fearful and daunted and more about stepping into a new, more empowering place. Um, because that's what's missing in the whole of the debate, and it's it's about recognizing that it's not an easy time, but it can also be a time where positivity can occur as well. So
So you
yeah.
mentioned as well that you do special training for women of color
Hmm.
and women with autism.
Yeah.
Um, why is that?
Yes.
Okay, can you say a bit about that? Why is that necessary? Why is that particular?
Yeah. Okay. So when we initially started out in well, in my case anyway, in 2021 to do the online training, it was kind of generic. So, and that was fine. Um, but what we saw as time went on is that there is a need. Not everybody could relate to, or be it wasn't necessarily of value in the same way for certain groups of individuals. So if somebody has is is neurodivergent, then certain things about some of what we talk about may not necessarily be suitable, and we'd have to take into account the the pace, even in terms of how we present the information, but also talking more about things that we would specifically recognize. So, for example, um, Black women, in some of the research that we found, and at the moment there isn't that many, but there is more. The general thing that comes across is that we experience menopause earlier than the average age. So I think like 48, 49, and it can be much more worse, particularly on a psychological level and with the hot flushes as well. So there are there are a number of reasons that that could be the case, stress being one of them. Um, but it is something that does show up. And it's the same as well with people who are neurodiverse. So if they have ADHD or menopause and the change is happening, anything to do with change anyway is can be extremely difficult,
Of
because
course, of
it's
course.
like what's going on. So that's raising anxiety, and then you've got the vicious circle. So what we've tried to do is to put the spotlight more and make it as accommodating. I mean, it's better in a way for the group who has autism or any neurodiverse issue, for that to be um, run by somebody who is also from that sphere as well. And so we've had what's called lived experience. So people who have that particular thing, and then they're able to relate that, and that really does help as well. And in relation to Black women, obviously it's very much about the racism and how that has impacted, and how they even in terms of how they get service or serve, it's not always seen that some of the symptoms that they might go to the GP with isn't something that they need medication for, but actually it could be that it's menopause, so there's kind of different assumptions and, all of that. So the specialist training is to give that space for the individual and make it as much as possible relevant for their needs as well. So we're also probably going to be doing some work with sickle cell, because
Uh-huh.
that again is an area that when it comes to the menopause, there are obvious direct issues and so on. So there are different groups. So we try to, accommodate for different groups, and we will do the research and make it as relevant for that group as possible.
Am I right,
Yeah.
Charm, that sickle cell is something that is more prevalent in Black women? Is that correct? Or
Yes,
Black people in
it is.
general?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. Yes, yes. So it's something, because of it's all to do with the blood. Um,
Uh-huh.
it's a kind of irregularity in the blood, but it is a very serious problem. Um, and again, it's useful for people in that situation to understand how the menopause can impact, and what they can do to manage it more effectively.
And can you say something about the sort of feedback that you've been getting from the people you work with?
Yeah, I mean, we've just been really each and every time that we've run the training, people have mostly what people are saying is how much it's opened their eyes. There are lots of information out there, but I think the thing is giving people the opportunity. I mean, we don't work with a large number of people. It's only a small group, but that group is there for a couple of hours a week over 5 weeks. And in that time, we're just giving them information that can then help them um, as part of their journey. And the general feedback has been that they've found it to be really really helpful. It's supported them in different stages. It's made them rethink about, their life and what they want to do next, and people have taken on different hobbies that they might not have necessarily thought about before. So I think I would say that it's definitely more, it does help. It is very empowering for people.
And you do these
Yeah.
trainings you mentioned on site and also online as well.
Yes, we do them
Okay.
both on site and online. I mean, obviously, the advantage of online is that it's anyone can access it from anywhere. We do them in the evenings as well, so that if people are at work, then it's easy for them to access it. Um, I mean, during lockdown, we were actually doing them during the day, but obviously, that's the whole thing has changed now. So. And yes, there are from time to time we will do on site. We have done a couple in London over the years. So,
And then there's an elephant in the room that we need to look at.
ooh,
As you,
what's that
yes,
element?
as you may have noticed, I'm a man. And
Uh-huh, yes.
yes, thank you. And on behalf of my gender, I'd like to ask you what men need to know about the menopause. If you're living with a woman who's going through the transition, as you call it,
Mm,
how can
mm.
we help? How can we support? What should we do? What shouldn't we do? Please. We are
Yeah.
a lot of men, because I was thinking, I want to ask some of, when I was preparing for this interview, I think I'm going to contact a couple of my mates and ask them what they know about the menopause. And I thought,
Mm.
boys don't really talk about that.
Yes, yes,
So,
absolutely. Yeah,
so please,
yeah,
what would you advise?
yeah. Well, Ben, that's great. I'm just really pleased that you have raised that because it's something that comes up as well when we do the training. In fact, I mean, I won't go into this, but there is a type of male equivalent menopause called andropause, but it's not something, it's more lifestyle and it's a very minute amount of men that get it. But anyway, that's something that sometimes come up. But the first thing that I would say is exactly what you just did, which is to ask, to seek, to get yourself familiar. Because a lot of the time, and that may be through a combination of talking to other women, going online. There are lots of different information that you can get on places like Google and things like that. We have actually been thinking also about at some point doing sessions for men as well to, just to sort of, give certain things for them to consider and explore. But I would say, you know, for men to try as well to be as proactive as they can. So as I mentioned to you, the menopause goes through different stages, and sometimes it's when the onset has happened um, that men may feel that that's the time, to be responsive. But it's actually good to know as much as you can before that takes shape so that you're both kind of in partnership and working on it together. So that would be the ideal situation, so um and yeah, just to kind of know that this is not a disease. It's a natural process that every woman will experience, some earlier than others. But the main thing is to find out, get information, find out information that you can
And a
from
good place to
either other women.
start is maybe your website, We Menopause.
There is
Can
that.
you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, that's right. So what we've got is information on there about what we do, and how you can contact us for, getting training. And then, if we will either we'll put you on our list and then we can keep you updated on information as well. Um, but yes, I mean, for sure, that would be a very good place uh to start with as well, most definitely. Yeah. So yeah, so we have the website. um I think we have Pinterest, and we also will be at some point, I think very soon actually, having Instagram as well, or some other sort of social media, so people can make connection that way as well.
Charm,
Yeah,
we'll leave it there. Thank you
yeah,
so much. That was really, really interesting. And I think a lot of women and men will find that really, really useful. So,
great.
if you want to find out more about Charm's regular seminars and workshops, both on-site and online, relating to self-care with herbs and nutrition, menopause awareness, and female and hormonal health, check out her websites. There's wemenopause.co.uk and Holistic Medicine. That's holistic with all one word with a W. holisticmedicine.co.uk. And for more information about the Moonletter interviews, you can go to moonletter.co.uk. Thank you, Charm.
Thank you very much, Ben.
And for more Moonletter interviews and podcasts, go to moonletter.co.uk.